Hello grade 12s. On this video I'm going to complete task 13.11 from your textbook with you. Task 13.11 is a cost accounting calculations, analysis and interpretation. So TikTok lollies makes and sells lollies at 12 Rand each. This price has stayed the same for the last 2 years. During the year ended 28 February, they made 40,000 lollies. There are no stock of ice creams at the beginning or the end of the year. And so in 13.11.1, you have to complete the unit cost table by calculating the missing figures. The unit cost table is given to you in your textbook on page 528. And if you look at A is the direct material cost per unit for 2008. So that's what we're going to be calculating, direct material costs per unit. Remember, in order to calculate the unit cost, all we have to do is take the total direct material cost, 200,000, and divide it by the number of units produced, 40,000. That will give us an answer of 5 Rand per unit. Okay, then B, we have to calculate the direct labor cost per unit. So we're going to take the total direct labor cost of 40,000 and divide it by 40,000 units produced, which will give us an answer of 1 Rand per unit. Okay, then C, we're calculating the prime cost per unit. Okay, remember this one here is per unit. Okay, so we already got the direct material cost and the direct labor cost per unit. All we have to do is add up those two answers. So 5 plus 1 Rand will be 6 Rand. D is the total prime cost. Okay, so for the total prime cost, we can take our answer from here, which is 6 Rand, and multiply it by 40,000 units. Okay, alternatively, you could also just add the total direct material costs plus the total direct labor costs. And you should get the same answer of 240,000. Then E, we have to calculate the total selling and distribution cost. So this is the total selling and distribution. Okay, we've been given the unit selling and distribution. So we'll take the unit selling and distribution, which is 150, and multiply it by 40,000 units. That gives us an answer of 60,000 Rand. And in 13.11.2, you have to calculate the unit cost of each lolly made during the year. Now the unit cost is the direct material cost, the direct labor cost, and the factory overhead cost. Because we're calculating the unit costs and we have been given the unit costs, we can use those unit costs to do the calculation. So our direct material per unit was 5 Rand, direct labor per unit was 1 Rand, and factory overheads per unit given to you on the table is 2 Rand. Just add up all of that and it will give us an answer of 8 Rand. You could have used the totals, which would have been 200,000 for direct material, 40,000 for direct labor, and 80,000 for factory overheads, and then divided your answer by 40,000. So this is just an alternative way of doing the calculation. So you can say 200,000 plus 40,000 plus 80,000, and then just divide your answer by 40,000 units, and you'll see that you should get the same answer of 8 Rand. Okay, in 13.11.3, you have to calculate the markup percentage, and this is the normal formula we use for markup, which is selling price minus gross price divided by the cost price multiplied by 100. Okay, so the selling price, was given to us right at the beginning of the question, which was 12 Rand. The cost price, we just calculated here, is 8 Rand. So we're going to say 12 minus 8, that's the gross profit per unit, divided by 8 Rand cost price, and multiply the answer by 100. This will give you an answer of 50%. And in 13.11.4, there's some theory on the concepts. What is the difference between a fixed and a variable cost? And give one example of each. I'll explain. Okay, so fixed costs are constant regardless of the level of production, while variable costs vary with the level of production. Fixed costs examples would be rent, depreciation, insurance, and variable costs, materials, labor. You could have others as well. Okay, then in 13.11.5, you have to calculate the break-even point. This is the formula for the break-even point like we've done in previous questions. It's total fixed cost divided by selling price minus variable cost per unit. I've given you an extended formula here to tell you that fixed cost is equal to factory overheads plus administration costs. And on the top here, we're going to use the total figures. On the bottom, we're going to use the unit figures. Okay, so we will take the selling price per unit, we'll subtract the direct material costs per unit, the direct labor cost per unit, and the selling and distribution costs per unit. So let's do that. Okay, so if you look at the table which we've been given, the total factory overhead is 80,000 and administration costs 160,000. So that's on the numerator. For the denominator, the ice creams are sold at 12 Rand each. The direct material cost is 5 Rand per unit. The direct labor cost is 1 Rand per unit. And the selling and distribution cost per unit given to you in the table is 1 Rand 50. Okay, you would work out that answer and get an answer of 53,334 units. Please remember that we always round up. So even if it was 53,333.333, we still round it up to 53,334 units. Okay, in 13.11.6, should the owner be happy with the performance of the business in terms of the break-even? Take into account that the break-even last year was 25,000. And this year the break-even is 53,000. So the break-even point is actually increased. That's never a good sign. Also, they've only made 40,000 units. So the owner should not be satisfied with the performance. Okay. A loss was made in the current year as only 40,000 units were produced and sold. This is 13,334 units less than the break-even point. Okay, you can also say that the break-even point increased from 25,000 units to 53,334 units. Okay, so now you can say. Okay, so this next part is basically an extension of the answer. So in exams, depending on how many marks something like this is for, you would go for this. Right? It's also a higher level, so you could just see if you have time and if you can do it. Okay, now I did say here that a loss was made in the current year. Okay, so in order to calculate the loss, this is how you can do it. We take the number of units which was less than the break-even point, 13,334. And we multiply it by the bottom part of the break-even calculation. So just 12 minus 5 minus 1 minus 1.5, you calculate that answer. And that's what we're going to multiply by. So basically, this is the calculation from the bottom. And you get an answer of 450. Okay, so we'll take 13,334 units. Remember, this is the difference between the number of units which were produced and the break-even point. And we multiply it by this that we've calculated, 450. And that gives us an answer of 60,003. And this is the loss which was made by the business. Okay, so this is an extension. You don't have to do this, but you can. 13.11.7, give two possible reasons why the direct material cost per unit has increased. Okay, so direct material cost increases if the price of the raw materials have increased. Also, if there's an increase in the price of the carriage of raw materials. It always increases when there's wastage. That means when the laborers are using too much of the material unnecessarily. And you can give any other reason as well. Okay, so what effect has this increase had on the profits of the business? Now, if the direct material cost increases, the gross profit per unit decreases. Okay, so the gross profit per unit will decrease. Okay, then briefly discuss two suggestions owners should consider to reduce this cost. So how can we reduce the direct material cost? One thing is to find cheaper suppliers. To find a supplier who is closer to reduce carriage. To train the staff in order to reduce wastage. Improve the control of stock, so that means that to ensure that stock is not being stolen. Can also increase the selling price to increase the gross profit. 13.11.8 Factory overheads have decreased as a result of economies of scale. Briefly explain what is meant by this term. Okay, so economies of scale. What economies of scale means is that as more units are produced, the overhead costs become lower per unit. Okay, so factory overheads are fixed. So the more you produce, the total amount of the cost is divided by a larger number. So the cost per unit come down. So that is exactly what economies of scale means. Okay, so another way of saying it, fixed costs per unit decrease as more units are produced. Okay, 13.11.9. Do you agree with the owner keeping the selling price of the lollies the same for 20.7 and 20.8? Why? Explain briefly. Remember with this, you can either say yes, you do agree, or you can say that you don't agree. Either way, must justify your answer. So if you say no, you can say the cost of manufacturing each lolly in 20.7 was 6 Rand 30. But in 20.8, it increased to 8 Rand. Therefore, they are making less profit. Okay. Then, or you can say yes. Okay. Their sales have increased from 25,000 to 40,000. And in view of the economic climate, if they increase the selling price, they might not sell as much. Okay, so that means that if they increase the selling price, they'll lose customers. Okay, so that's all for this question. Please make sure that you do it in your workbooks. Thank you. Bye.